I'd like you to open your Bibles with me, please, to Galatians chapter 5, 16 and 17. We are continuing our series, Man Up. I'm reading from the New International Version. So I say, live by the Spirit, and you will not gratify the desires of the sinful nature. For the sinful nature desires what is contrary to the Spirit, and the Spirit what is contrary to the sinful nature. They are in conflict with each other, so that you do not do what you want. A couple of weeks ago, we discussed the fact that men have in their DNA the heart of a warrior. They love to go against the impossible odds. It's the reason why that we like certain movies. We love to see people that are the underdogs and where everything is stacked against them and somehow they overcome the most dire and difficult circumstances, and they refuse to give up until victory is in their grasp. That's the heart of a warrior. And last week we talked about, even though God has given us the heart of a warrior, and we are a strong man, there are certain things that act like kryptonite that make the strong man weak. And we talked about those three things. Today, in the final installment, I want to talk a little bit about emotions and how they affect men. Jonathan Mortensen said, feelings are much like waves. We can't stop them from coming, but we can choose which one to surf. It's an interesting thing. Men don't like to think of themselves as being emotional. We say women are emotional. Women like to just get in a flutter and they're emotional about things and they cry a lot about things. We're not emotional. Men are strong. Men are logical. Men are strategic. We're thinkers. And that's nice to say, but the fact is all humans are emotional beings. God made us with the capacity to feel. And since God made us with this capacity, since God has given us emotions, it's a good thing. But even though men and women both have emotions, it is true that we deal with them differently. I'll give you an example. Women talk and men act. Now, before you get too riled up about that, I'll give you an example. Often when a woman needs to process some difficult emotions that they have, they love to sit and talk about it, talk it through. Sometimes a woman will ask one of her friends to come over to the house, and they'll drink tea, and they'll talk for hours about the whole situation and the circumstance. Can you imagine a guy doing that? Hey, John, come on over to the house. I want to talk to you about some things. Sure, he'll come. You spend a couple hours on that couch talking, he won't come again. Women love to talk, but for guys, we feel like that talking just doesn't accomplish anything. At least it doesn't accomplish much. We'd rather do something about it. We'd rather, let's go, all right, you said the problem, let's go fix it. And for a woman, she'd say, well, you don't even understand the whole problem. Here you are just barging up. You're like a bull in a china shop. Why don't you just sit down and listen? because I don't have 2 hours. The guys are laughing. The girls absolutely want nothing to do with this. Hang with me. You're going to be all right. The problem is when our emotions begin to lead us to do something, often that something is something that we really shouldn't be doing. And this is why we men need to learn to be led by the Spirit rather than driven emotionally. Paul describes this tendency. Paul said in Romans chapter 7, 15 to 16, there are things that I know that I'm supposed to be doing, and I don't do those things. And there are things that I know are hands off. I'm not supposed to be doing those things. And those are the things that I do. It's like there is this impulse within me. There is this urge within me, and I am emotionally driven. I feel like I got to do this. I'm driven to do this, and I know I'm not supposed to, but I have to. I'm emotionally driven. Look at our text, because there's the answer. In our text, it says, if you live by the Spirit, you will not gratify the desires of the sinful nature. And it talks about how that the sinful nature is contrary to the Spirit. Notice what it says. They are in conflict with each other so that you do not do what you want. We're constantly doing those things that we're not supposed to be doing. And I think it's important to realize this too. Walking by the Spirit is a choice. We have our emotions, and there they are, and we have a choice as to what we're going to be, whether we're emotionally driven or whether we have decided to be led by the Spirit. Now, let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. And I want to go back. Last week we talked about Samson. I want to go back to Samson because I think he's such a good example of what I'm talking about. In fact, I would say that Samson is the poster child for being emotionally driven. Samson was absolutely led by his emotion. Last week, if you remember, Samson had decided to marry a Philistine woman. In fact, if I could be more accurate, a smoking hot Philistine woman. Samson didn't care that she worshiped false gods. Samson ignored his parents and their guidance. Samson refused to follow the prompting and the conviction of God. Because Samson decided to allow his feelings to drive his actions instead of being led by the Spirit, instead of being led by God. Now, Samson, if you'll remember, had just snacked on some honey, and he washed it down with some adult beverages with his friends at his bachelor party. And so it is at that point that he decided that he would have a little fun. Now, for guys, this will help you women, for guys, they find no better fun than to have competition. If we play this game, that's fine, but if we could make it a contest, and if you really want to beef up the stakes, let's put a bet on it. Let's just see if we could, see if we can bet on this thing and see where we are. So he says, listen, I have a riddle. If you guys can answer this riddle within the time period of this bachelor party, he said, what I'll do is I'll give you 30 changes of raiment. I'll give you 30 fine suits. But if you cannot answer my riddle, then you have to give me 30 suits. Oh yeah, they can do that. Samson, of course, isn't thinking, math was not his strong suit. He's got to come up with 30 pieces of clothing. They only have to come up with one apiece. But that's men. We don't think about things either. It's the competition. We don't think about the results either, by the way. These are things to help you, ladies, just to let you know why these men do what they do. This is why. The riddle, out of the eater, something to eat. Out of the strong, something sweet. And of course, we know what that is because we have the benefit of reading it and knowing the story. And that is that honey was in the carcass of the lion. So it's the lion and it's honey. Well, they couldn't figure it out. And so finally, they go to his fiancée and they tell her, now I can't believe that first of all, you're marrying outside of the Philistine race and you are marrying this subclass of people because see, the Philistines were ruling the Israelites. And you're going to let him embarrass us? If you do not get him to tell you what that riddle is and then you tell us, we're going to burn you and your father to death. So she goes to Samson and she pulls out the big gun. Now, you know what the big gun is, ladies. And if you don't, let me just remind you. She started crying. You know, guys are a sucker for crying. I mean, we just are. It's something about that warrior spirit, and you start crying, you become helpless. Somehow we won't fix it. And so there it is. And she's using that wedge. And so she starts crying, you don't love me. If you loved me, you would tell me. You would tell me what that riddle is. You don't trust me. You just don't like me at all. I don't even know why you want to marry me. And then she starts to bawl. The crocodile tears just begin to fall. There it is. Men, be smart. Stop looking at your wives. Just look at me at this point. There's certain points in this sermon now it's just good to look straight ahead. And so he gives in, as most men do. And he tells her, and she tells them. And so then all of a sudden they come back. And they said, well, what's stronger than a lion? What's sweeter than honey? Well, of course, he knew where they got the information because he was the only one. He didn't even tell his parents. He was the only one who knew what that riddle meant. And he knew that his fiancée had given that to these men. He is enraged. His emotions have flared to nuclear proportions. He is off the chain. He goes out and he goes to Ashkelon. And in Ashkelon, you got men, they're just walking around. Honestly, in light of today's terrorism, this is honestly, I want you to see something that the Bible points out here. He goes into this town, and you have an innocent man who's just busy about his own business. He's not really doing anything. He's innocent. And he is mercilessly slain. He is murdered by Samson. And Samson takes his clothes, puts them in a bag, and he goes to 29 more people, 30 in total, and he murders them, takes their clothes, goes back to the party, throws the clothes at the men, gives his fiancée a glaring stare, and storms out of his own bachelor party and goes back home to where he's at. Well, his father-in-law is pretty sure that Samson basically hates his fiancée now. This thing's over. She's heartbroken. She's embarrassed. It's kind of like being left at the altar. There you are. All your friends are there. You've already had the bridal shower. You've got all the invitations sent, and the groom skips out. So the father decides, I'm going to give her to one of these companions, and gives her to one of the men that are there. Now, we don't know how long passed here, but Samson comes back to the home, and he is about to retrieve his wife. And the father-in-law stops and says, whoa, wait, you can't do this. No. I thought you hated her. So I gave her to one of the men that were here at the party. I mean, now he is just absolutely royally ticked off. He is so mad. His emotions have flared like you wouldn't believe. He storms out again. He catches 300 foxes. Now try that on a good mid-afternoon day. 300 foxes. He ties their tails together, places a torch in those tails, lights the torch, and sets them loose amongst all of the crops of the Philistines. Now you got to understand the implications of this. All these crops now are ablaze. They're on fire. It's burning. This is an agrarian society, which means that it's an agricultural society. They depend on crops and they depend on farming. This is their economic stability. And it has just now been destroyed. It's been devastated. Samson devastated the entire Philistine nation economically. They are beside themselves. This is a national emergency. And they find out that it was Samson who devastated the economy. They are so enraged, they go back to his former fiancée and her father, and they burn them alive. Well, then they get a posse together, a great horde of about 1,000 people, and Samson has become the Philistines' most wanted man. They encamp in Lehi, a town in Judah, the tribe of Judah, which is Samson's tribe. Now suddenly, these people are in trouble. Remember, they're still under the rule of the Philistines. And one of the Israelites have done this. And now the entire nation has turned against them. They don't know what they're going to do. I mean, you can see how brutal they are by what they did to that fiancée and her father. So Samson decides that he would play both sides of the fence. And he tells the people, he said, listen, I'll surrender myself. I'll let you bind me. Go ahead and tie me up, and you can deliver me to the Philistines. So they tie him up, and they turn him over to the Philistines, and they take him out into the desert, across the desert. And when they get to a certain point, he breaks the ropes, and he takes a fresh jawbone of an ass, and I do not know what that means. One that was recently killed, I suppose, right? I don't know. But he takes it, and he begins a warrior's battle that surpasses any and all. And he kills 1,000 Philistines that day. 1,000. He is blood-soaked with the uncircumcised that he has killed. And here they are. And after the battle has ended, he makes a statement that I think is one of his problems. Notice what he says. With a donkey's jawbone, I have made donkeys of them. With a donkey's jawbone, I have killed 1,000 men. I don't know if he caught it or not, but what Samson is dealing with here is pride. He's slinging around a jawbone. Look what I did. With a donkey's jawbone, I did this. With a donkey's jawbone, I accomplished this. We do it all the time. It's kind of one of those emotional things that guys have. Pride. Listen, we like to be seen. One of the things in the NBA, if you're watching the finals, one of the things in the NBA that you can be called for is taunting. Right? Taunting. LeBron James, when he stepped over the guy, and somehow he got away with it. I don't understand that, but full disclosure, I am a Golden State fan. But steps over Green, I think it was, right? Steps over Green, and Green doesn't even touch him, and Green's suspended, and LeBron James gets his hand slapped. What? It's taunting. And we do that. You know, we bang on our chest. Ooh, look what I did. Look what I accomplished. I did that. Preachers do that, by the way, too. Well, you know, we had about 1,000 in church Sunday. To God be all the glory. But what you're really saying is, look what I did. Slinging a jawbone around. Samson, he's having to deal with pride. Now, there's an interesting point that I think I have to make. James 4:6. God is opposed to the proud, but gives grace to the humble. And Proverbs 16:18 says, pride goes before destruction, a haughty spirit before the fall. He is opposed to the proud. When we become proud, when we decide, I did this, when we decide I'm accomplishing this, and we remove God completely out of the equation, suddenly God removes His hand of blessing. God removes His strength. God removes His guidance, and He leaves you out on your own. Samson is being emotionally driven, and it's costing him. His fiancée and his father are dead. It's his fault, by the way. How so? Well, because, first of all, he is so emotionally driven that he didn't listen to God. He didn't listen to his family. He didn't listen to the law. He just decided, I want this, and I need this. My emotions want this, and he took it. He was so upset because his fiancée, he felt like, had betrayed him when he didn't even bother to consult God and say, Lord, what exactly is happening here? What should I do? And to find out, you know what? She was protecting her father and herself from being killed and destroyed. She didn't have much of a choice. But you see, he's so emotionally driven. He just shoots from the hip and he just flies off the handle and he just responds emotionally and makes a mess of it. He becomes a murderer. Kills 30 innocent men that will not go home. They will not be with their wives that night or any other night. They will not go home and be with their children. Their children will grow up without a father because Samson allowed his emotions to drive him to where he never should have gone. His emotions have caused him to wreak devastation. And the Philistine economy now is collapsing and is in ruins. You say, good, they're the enemy. Yeah, but that trickles right down to the Israelites. He has placed Judah in danger simply because he has decided to allow his emotions to drive his action. Is that making sense? And now he has placed himself in great danger. He has positioned himself now where he has slaughtered all of these people. Their blood is still on him. He is out in the middle of the desert. And the Philistines could come and destroy him at this moment. He feels like his strength is gone. Or he could die of thirst. His need drives him back to God. And you can see it. He cried out to the Lord, "You have given your servant this great victory." Notice that. Who gave his servant? God. He is now ascribing the victory to God. "You have given your servant this great victory. Must I now die of thirst and fall into the hands of the uncircumcised?" Then God opened up the hollow place in Lehi, and water came out of it. And when Samson drank, his strength returned, and he revived. Once Samson returned to God, once Samson humbled himself, once Samson admitted that it was God who had really defeated the Philistines, then his strength returned. Because God resisteth the proud, but He gives grace to the humble. Paul said, "In my weakness, that's when I'm made strong." Question is, do you have the courage to return to God in humility? Do you have the courage? Sometimes men do not like to ask for directions, and men do not like to back up. We don't like to say we're sorry. We don't like to say we were wrong. It's silly, but it's true. But do you have the courage to do it? Because if we could learn to not be emotionally driven, if we could learn to somehow say, you know what, before I just respond to every impulse that I have, I'm going to force myself, I am going to choose to be directed by the Spirit. You would be amazed at what God could do in your life. In 1873, two preachers were talking about a conference that they had just attended. Henry L. Varley said to his new friend Dwight L. Moody, "Moody, the world has yet to see what God can do with a man whose heart is totally surrendered to Him." Those words pierced Moody's soul. And over the next few weeks, he contemplated those words and he thought about those words until finally Moody resolved, "I will be that man. If God is looking for a man of integrity, a man of honor and courage and faithfulness, with God's help, I will be such a man." And Moody went on to be the greatest evangelist of the 19th century, simply because he was willing to be Spirit-led. You are a warrior. You're fighting for a divine and righteous cause. God has given you gifts and you have potential that you can't even begin to imagine. Do you have the courage to be led by the Spirit? Will you be that man?